you're my hope and stay. Lord, I need you, oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness, oh God, how I need you. My one defense, my righteousness, oh God, how I need you. Long before all of creation, all that I see, you stood alone in your glory eternally. Then with a word you created galaxies formed at your feet. You're the highest of all, you're as high as can be. Glorified on the throne, give praise to the King. All of heaven bows down in worship to thee, Lord. You are, oh Lord, by far highest of all. Who, Lord, can fathom your power, mercy, and grace? Raining your blessings upon us all of our days. Love beyond all understanding, humbly we offer our praise. You're the highest of all, you're as high as can be. Glorified on the throne, give praise to the King. All of heaven bows down in worship to thee, Lord. You are, oh Lord, by far. You're the highest of all, you're as high as can be. Glorified on the throne, give praise to the King. All of heaven bows down in worship to thee, Lord. You are, oh Lord, by far highest of all. Yes, Lord, you are highest of all. There's a place where mercy reigns and never dies. There's a place where streams of grace flow deep and wide. Where all the love I've ever found comes like a flood, comes flowing down. At the cross, I surrender my life. I'm in all of you, in all of you. Where your love ran red and my sin washed white, I owe all to you, I owe all to you, Jesus. There's a place where sin and shame are powerless, where my heart has peace with God and forgiveness, where all the love I've ever found comes like a flood, comes flowing down. At the cross, I surrender my life. I'm in all of you, in all of you. Where your love ran red and my sin washed white, I owe all to you, I owe all to you. Here my hope is found, here on holy ground. Here I bow down, here I bow down, here I surrender my life. I'm in all of you, in all of you. Where your love ran red and my sin washed white, I owe all to you. I owe all to you. I owe all to you. I owe all to you, Jesus. Oh, how good it is when the family of God dwells together in spirit, in faith and unity, where the bonds of peace, of acceptance and love are the fruit of His presence here among us. So with one voice we'll sing to the Lord, and with one voice we'll lift out His word, till the whole earth sees the Redeemer has come, for He dwells in the presence of His people. Oh, how good it is on this journey.
But Caitlin came through. Thank you, everybody, for being here. So very thankful to be here this Wednesday evening, and it got darker earlier than we were used to, a week ago, but good to be here. Thank you for your patience as we did close the fellowship room this evening. I know we're used to filling that up and having a meal together before Wednesday evening service, but we had a funeral service here today, and we have one tomorrow, and it's set up for that service. And so thank you so much for your patience. We do want to make a few announcements. Going to have a couple of songs. Two songs? Prayer, and then we'll be dismissed to our Bible classes. If you are a grown-up person and you're not going to the men's discussion class in the other building, you need to stay here, because ladies' class will stay in here tonight for the same reason we didn't eat in there, because it's set up for the service tomorrow. So, did want to mention that to you, and we'll be back to our regular classroom destinations next week. Diane Walker's at home, recovering from surgery, doing well. Talked to her today, and has a lot of family coming to visit her, so we're very thankful about that. Vernell Fuller also home following her surgery yesterday, doing well. She did stay one night in the hospital. Foster Caffey is recovering from having a pacemaker put in last week, and has been out and about, so we're thankful for that. Let's not forget Donna Rodriguez continuing to suffer from terrible headaches. We have several people fighting cancer. We have a few expectant mothers that we're praying for. Bailey Wilson is due soon, Blanca Lydia Rivera, and of course Caitlin Coots. But we have four actually, sympathies that we need to share. This morning, early afternoon, we had services for our dear sister Peggy Marshall, oldest member of the Manassas Church of Christ, and member here since 1977, and had a wonderful visit with her family. And so we do want to keep that family in prayers and not forget our sister. We heard a wonderful story that I need to tell you about our sister Peggy today from her son Steve. He said that not long ago Peggy bought a blouse at Walmart right there and didn't like it, and waited to take it back to exchange it. And by the time she went to exchange it, they said the barcode is no longer in the system. So she put it back in the bag, took it back to the lady section, found a blouse she liked, and exchanged it right there on the rack and left. And when Steve told her, "Mom, you can't do that," she said, "Oh, they never arrest old people." So I love that story about Peggy so much. Another thing that we have, and it's in our library, she was baptized in 1977, and our own Max Goodgen, who was an elder at the time, wrote her a letter welcoming her to our family, and the family brought that letter today, and it's in our library if you'd like to take a look at it. But we want to remember the passing of our sister, Peggy Marshall. Also, we heard just on Monday that our sister Videnia Goodgen passed away on Monday evening, about 5:30 in the evening. The Gudgeons came here in 1968, and Videnia was here until just last year. And she had moved out to Oklahoma City, and she had recently been in memory care and was put on hospice care last week and passed on Monday. There will be a memorial service for our sister Videnia scheduled here in January, and we'll let you know more about that as the day approaches. We've been praying for Tanya Hurley's sister Maria Martin. Tanya's mother Mary has been taking care of her there in the Atlanta area. And we heard Tuesday morning that Maria passed away. Tanya and Mel are down there, and Tanya was there when her sister passed. We need to keep that family in prayer. Tanya's father, Robert, of course, a missionary that we support, is in New Zealand, and so we need to keep that whole family in prayers. And then Dennis Holloway, our brother in Christ and a former member here, raised at the Silver Spring Church of Christ, and a regular camper and staffer at Camp Wamaba back in the day. He passed quite suddenly at 63 years of age at Johns Hopkins Hospital. We'll be having services for him here tomorrow. Visitation is at 11:30 and the service is at 12:30. And many of you I know remember he and his wife Lisa, and especially their kids who are active in our youth group and regulars at camp as well, his son Matt and his daughter Courtney. So let's keep that family in prayers. Many others on our prayer list. Do call your attention to the announcements that you received via email. Some events. Home Builders Fall Festival this coming Saturday. That's in your announcements. It begins at 3 p.m., not 4 p.m. Contact Jessica Lazier if you have any questions. There's the note again about Chris Noe being in the library after services each Sunday morning to work with kids participating in Know the Books of the Bible. So we did want to mention that to you. Youth group will be having a rehearsal to prepare for the Senior Saints Banquet this coming Sunday. After services, get changed if you need to, get your lunch, bring it back here. We're going to be practicing until about 3 o'clock. And then the young adults are going to be having the third Friday devotional on the 17th. On Friday the 17th. Saturday the 18th, the youth group will be rehearsing for the Senior Saints Banquet 2 to 4 p.m. And then our Senior Saints Banquet is going to be held on the 19th after AM services. Please sign up if you plan to attend. The sign-up sheet is on the youth group bulletin board. It went up tonight. We are not specifying age. When I turned 55, I gladly declared myself a senior saint and an owl. But we have had members in their 80s refuse to admit the same. So that's up to you. But the sign-up sheet is on the youth group bulletin board. So we didn't want to mention that. And there are details in your announcement sheet tonight for the youth group about serving and all the ways that we need the youth group to serve at that event. This is an event the youth group prepares every year in honor of our senior saints, and we're looking forward to having another one on the 19th. Monday night for the Master, we didn't have one in October. It was just hectic, and it continues to be. We're going to have one in November on the 20th, and hope that you'll come be a part of that. That 6 to 8 dinner will be provided. There's also an announcement about Magi boxes. We're collecting for those right now. School items, school supplies, details about that on your announcements. At this time, let's lift our voices together and sing praise to God.
Our first song this evening will be Sanctuary. O Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. Lord, teach your children to stop the fighting, start uniting all sanctuary for you.
And then our second song this evening will be 154 in the songbook, Give Me the Bible.
Give me the Bible, star of gladness gleaming, to cheer the wander, blown and tempest tossed. No storms can hide that radiance peaceful beaming, since Jesus came to seek and save the lost. Give me the Bible, holy message shining, thy light shall guide me in the narrow way. Precept and promise, law and love combining, till night shall vanish in eternal day. Give me the Bible when my heart is broken, when sin and grief have filled my soul with fear. Give me the precious words by Jesus spoken. Hold up faith's lamp to show my Savior near. Give me the Bible, holy message shining. Thy light shall guide me in the narrow way. Precept and promise, law and love combining, till night shall vanish in eternal day. Give me the Bible, all my steps enlighten. Teach me the danger of these roads below. That lamp of safety o'er the gloom shall brighten. That light alone the path of peace can show. Give me the Bible, holy message shining. Thy light shall guide me in the narrow way. Precept and promise, law and love combining, till night shall vanish in eternal day. Give me the Bible, light of life immortal. Hold up that splendor by the open grave. Show me the light from heaven's shining portals. Show me the glory gilding Jordan's way. Give me the Bible, holy message shining. Thy light shall guide me in the narrow way. Precept and promise, law and love combining, till night shall vanish in eternal day.
Please bow with me. Our kind and gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this time that we have come together to spend time looking into your word, to see how it applies to our lives. And we ask, Father, that you please bless us and help us to use the understanding that we glean to apply that in our lives in the world around us. Help us to shine your light. Bless those who are hurting through illness. Bless those who are hurting through loss of loved ones. Bless those who are in travel, to and from, and take care of them all. Guide us, dear Lord, and bring us home to be with you. I pray this through Christ. Amen.
All right, good evening, everyone. If this is your first time here because you were in the ladies' class, I want to apologize because tonight we're in the book of Esther, and we're in possibly the most violent violent chapter of the entire book of Esther. So you came on the right day or the wrong day, depending on your perspective. Okay. Well, normally we start with a pop quiz of some of the things we've learned throughout the class of the Book of Esther. So if you've been in this class, I want to hear you answer these questions. If you haven't been in the class, pay attention, you may learn something. All right, who wrote Esther? We don't know. Very good. When was Esther written? We don't know. Very good. All right. Esther and Mordecai are from what tribe of Israel? Benjamin. Very good. And Haman is from what people? He is listed as an Agagite, and what else are the Agagites known as? The Amalekites. Oh, well, pronunciation doesn't really matter. All right. So we are in Esther chapter 9 tonight. Bit of a recap from last week. Last couple of weeks. So, Book of Esther starts with Esther becoming the queen. Then we introduce the villain of the story, Haman, who plots to destroy Mordecai and the people of Mordecai. Haman has no idea Esther is queen. So Haman goes through his whole plan, plotting and scheming to destroy Mordecai and the Jews. And then Esther reveals to the king who sanctioned Mordecai's killing of the Jewish people. Esther reveals to the king that she is also Jewish. She is of the same family as Mordecai, and she's about to be killed by Haman, who's the only other person in the room at the time. So the king, very much upset, declares that Haman will be killed, and he is hung on his own gallows. The phrase "hoisted by his own petard" is very apt in this scenario. And then last week we talked about the decree of the king. The king's decree that goes out after he realizes that Esther is Jewish and killing the Jewish people would also kill Esther. It doesn't stop Haman's order. We talked about this last week. The order of the king doesn't stop Haman's order. So technically, it's still on the books that the Jewish people are going to be killed on this day and on this date. But he sends out another edict saying that the Jewish people can defend themselves against whoever comes after them. So we're going to see the consequences of that today. So Esther chapter 9, it's kind of a long chapter, so we're going to break it up into two parts. We'll see how far we can get in the first one. Okay. Chapter 9, verse 1. Now in the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's command and edict were about to be carried out, on the very day when the enemy of the Jews hoped to gain the mastery over them, the reverse occurred. The Jews gained mastery over those who hated them. The Jews gathered in their cities throughout the provinces of King Ahasuerus to lay hands on those who sought them harm. And no one could stand against them, for the fear of them had fallen on all peoples. All the officials of the provinces and the satraps and their governors and the royal agents also helped the Jews, for the fear of Mordecai had fallen on them. For Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame spread throughout all the provinces. For the man Mordecai grew more and more powerful. The Jews struck all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying them, and did as they pleased to throw to those who hated them. In Susa, the citadel itself, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men, and also killed Parshandatha and Dalphon and Aspatha and Paratha and Adalia and Aradatha and Parmashta and Arisai and Aradai and Vazitha, the 10 sons of Haman and the sons of Hamadatha, the enemy of the Jews. But they laid no hands on the plunder. That very day, the number of those killed in Susa and the citadel was reported to the king. And the king said to Queen Esther, in Susa, the citadel, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men, and also the 10 sons of Haman. What then have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now what is your wish? It shall be granted to you. And what further is your request? It shall be fulfilled. And Esther said, if it please the king, let the Jews who are in Susa be allowed tomorrow also to do according to this day's edict, and let the 10 sons of Haman be hanged on the gallows. So the king commanded this to be done. A decree issued in Susa, and the 10 sons of Haman were hanged. The Jews who were in Susa gathered also on the 14th day of the month of Adar, and they killed 300 men in Susa, but they laid no hands on the plunder. Now the rest of the Jews who were in the king's provinces also gathered to defend their lives, and got relief from their enemies, and killed 75,000 of those who hated them. But they laid no hands on the plunder. This was on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th day they rested and made that a day of feasting and gladness. But the Jews who were in Susa gathered on the 13th day and on the 14th day, and rested on the 15th day, making that a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore the Jews of the villages who live in the rural towns hold the 14th day of the month of Adar as a day for gladness and feasting, as a holiday, and as a day on which they send gifts and food to one another. Okay, we're going to break there for a sec. I mentioned in a previous class that chapters, the spacing of chapters and spacing of verses is actually more arbitrary than you might think. This is definitely an example of that, where we get a whole bunch of information just in this first portion of one chapter. So, what do we see in this first portion of the chapter? What do we see in this first part of the chapter? Anyone at all? Don't everyone raise your hand at once.
You see a fair amount of death. I mean, it's shocking to see the numbers.
Yep, fair amount of death. 800 in the city of Susa, all told, and 75,000 across the Persian Empire. Yes, Barry. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This was not conquest. This was not conquering. This was defending. This was protecting what they had. This wasn't about taking their neighbor's land. This was about preserving their own. Yes? We don't know really. We got some ballpark figures. I'm gonna say this: you really got to take numbers. Whenever someone mentions a number of people in a book like this, you really got to take the numbers with a grain of salt, because they are ballparking. They don't really have that good of a census. I mean, even the Roman Empire, 400-ish years from now, will have suspect numbers. We don't really trust numbers that are as they are reported. But we can tell that even with high numbers in the millions of people spread across the Persian Empire, even with that, that's still a lot of death and destruction in the Persian Empire. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. We're not told, but I think from the phrasing in chapter 8 of what the Jewish people are permitted to do is they are permitted to gather in force in their towns. They are permitted to gather in force against whoever comes against them. So it's very much a they swung first kind of a situation, I think, is what I'm reading into it. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is most likely. Yes, Travis, and yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 Yep. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Angela, then Margaret. Like I said. Yep. Hmm. There's about 75,000 different reasons why they did what they did. There's 75,800 800 different people who are killed by the Jews in this, and we don't know. It could be a combination of things. The Jews are very much a displaced people. They are strangers in a strange land. They're not from around here. And at this point, some of the Jews are back in Israel. Some of the Jews are back in the region. But these folks that the decree goes out to, most of them aren't. Most of them are scattered from the shores of the Aegean Sea to the banks of the Indus River. It's a large area, and they're scattered throughout, and they're seen jumping forwards by a couple thousand years. When the First Crusade happens, the Jewish people are some of the first victims of it because they are seen as just foreigners wherever they are, foreigners wherever they go. And I think we can read a little bit of that, even just a little bit of that into this explains a little bit more. Margaret, you had your hand up, and then Barry. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 That's why it's repeated so much is they did not lay hands on the plunder. That's why I think it's so important that in none of these situations do they lay their hands on the plunder. Yeah, Barry.
There's two other reasons. One is they didn't really assimilate, not fully.
Yep.
And at the highest levels of power still
Yeah.
practicing his religion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons they were in captivity is to solidify,
Mm-hmm.
their religious commitment to God, the Mosaic religion,
Mm-hmm.
and all those things, the synagogue gathering,
Mm-hmm.
all mixed together in the scroll.
Mm-hmm.
That happened during the Babylonian captivity, so they didn't
Yep.
assimilate. And also, Jeremiah 29:11 is a promise to them.
Yep.
And we apply it to us. But that's to these people who are living in captivity
Mm-hmm.
and Persia.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to caution you there.
Yep. Yep.
They were successful.
Mm-hmm.
They were foreign, they were successful, they didn't fully assimilate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Matt. All right. Yes. So, I was actually going to go straight to that. So, thank you, Matt, for the segue. So, I mentioned in my questionnaire at the beginning what tribe are Mordecai and Esther from? They're from the tribe of Benjamin. Very good. It's also mentioned that Mordecai is from a specific family. If you go back to Esther chapter 2, verse 5, when it's talking about Mordecai, it gives his lineage as all good Jewish chronicles of this time do. It lists Mordecai, son of Jair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjamite. Now, son of does a lot of heavy lifting that we kind of read a lot more into. We read a very specific reading into when, if you broaden it just a little bit, it actually becomes a little bit more. So when we think of son of, the son of, the son of, we think of father to son, father to son, father to son, straight dynastic. But in this, the use of Kish, a specific word Kish, is probably more about the town of Kish in the tribe of Benjamin, or the place of Kish in the tribe of Benjamin. You know, if you're going somewhere else, you're a son of your hometown. You're a son of Atlanta. You're a son of Manassas. You're a son of Oklahoma City, whatever. So Esther and Mordecai are both from the tribe of Benjamin in the town of Kish. Who else do we know is a son of Kish? Saul. So let's go back to 1 Samuel 15. A little flip over in the Bible here. 1 Samuel 15. Chapter 5. Or chapter 15, verse 2. Thus says the Lord of hosts, I have noted what Amalek did to Israel in opposing them on the way when they came up out of Egypt. Now go and strike Amalek and devote to destruction all that they have. Do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. Skipping over a few verses to verse 7. And Saul defeated the Amalekites from Havilah as far as Shur, which is east of Egypt, and he took Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive, and devoted to destruction all the people with the edge of the sword. But Saul and the people spared Agag, and the best of sheep and the oxen, and of the fatted calves and the lambs, and all that was good, and would not utterly destroy them. All that was despised and worthless they devoted to destruction. Verse 10, the word of the Lord came to Samuel, I regret that I have made Saul king, for he has turned back from following me and has not performed my commandments. What commandments was he given? He was told to destroy the Amalekites and not take any plunder. So let's go back to Esther, where we have another person from the tribe of Benjamin, person who's descended from the town of Kish, from the people of Kish. And what do we see? The destruction of the Agagites, who are descendants of Agag, king of the Amalekites, and they do not lay their hands on the plunder. So this is one of the, I've been saying for a long time, for almost this entire class, if you've been here, you've heard me say, Esther is one of the best literary works that we have in the Bible. It's layered. It's got personal interactions that would make Shakespeare jealous. It's got drama that the best writers that we have today on television can't even replicate. It's got action, it's got romance, it's got everything that you want. And this right here is something so big, so focal to this, that I think we sometimes, I know I missed it. I missed it the first time I was reading. I missed it the third time I was reading. I missed it whenever Barry told me, hey, you're doing Esther. I immediately read through it. I noted what I noted, and I went back and I read through some of the commentaries, and I missed this. Esther is fulfilling the promise that Saul made, that someone in her lineage before made. Saul was the first king of Israel. And he, because of his arrogance, because he turned away from the commandments of God, he had his crown taken away, and his descendants were no longer the kings of Israel. Esther, in a faraway land, in a completely different time, is now queen of Persia. She is queen over the Jewish people. And she fulfills exactly what God told Saul to do. It's one of these really long arcs of history in the Bible that you really got to look for, but it's there, and it's really good. So a couple other things that we see. Like I said, that's for me one of the biggest aspects of Esther that we see is this long arc of history, reaching back to the first king, and Esther is the last royal Jewish person mentioned in the Old Testament. There's no king of Judea when the Jewish people are returned from Babylonian captivity. They don't have a king. They are led by the priests. They are led by governors. They are led by they are led by Jewish officials within the Persian Empire, but they are not led by a king. Esther is the last Jewish person in the Old Testament that's mentioned. And the next royal that's mentioned, the next Jewish royal to come in the narrative, is in the New Testament. Jesus, the son of David. It's pretty cool. All right. Okay. Let's move on in the chapter. We've got a little bit of time. I think we can move on in the chapter. All right. So at this point, the enemies of the Jewish people have been destroyed, both in Susa and throughout the empire. And the Jewish people are now feasting and celebrating. Verse 20. And Mordecai recorded these things and sent letters to all the Jews who were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, both near and far, obliging them to keep the 14th day of the month of Adar, and also the 15th day of the same, year by year, as the days on which the Jews got relief from their enemies, as the month that has been turned for them from sorrow into gladness, and from mourning into a holiday, that they should make them days of feasting and gladness, days for sending gifts of food to one another and gifts to the poor. So the Jews accepted what they had started to do and what Mordecai had written to them. For Haman the Agagite, son of Hammedatha, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them and had cast pur, that is, lots, to crush and destroy them. But when it came before the king, he gave orders in writing that his evil plan should return on its own head, his evil plan that he had devised against the Jews should return on his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. Therefore they called these days Purim, after the term Pur. Therefore, because of all that was written in this letter, and of what they had faced in this matter, and all of what had happened to them, the Jews firmly obligated themselves and their offspring and all who joined them, that without fail they would keep these 2 days, according to what was written, and to a time appointed every year, that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, in every clan, province, and city, and that these days of Purim should never fall into disuse among the Jews, nor should the commemoration of these days cease among their descendants. Okay, I'm going to pause there for a second here. Because there's something very important in the background of the book of Esther that I mentioned in the first lesson. I mentioned when we got started. It's kind of been hanging in the background, and it's kind of strange if you think about it. We don't have any references, any mentions, any stories of Purim being celebrated in the New Testament. We don't have any references to the feasts. We don't have any references to Esther, Haman, or Mordecai. We don't have King Ahasuerus, which would explain a few things. And even more than that, even beyond that, when you look into the texts of the time, when you look at the writings that we have of the book of Esther, we don't have the book of Esther in the Dead Sea Scrolls. When people talk about the most accurate, the most historical, the most well-curated documents of the Old Testament, first, last, and only thing most people mention is the Dead Sea Scrolls, for good reason. It's a very extensive list, but we don't have Esther. We don't have Esther. We have Esther in some Septuagint, which is Greek translations. We have Esther in the Septuagint. We have Esther in some of the Greek translations from around the empire. From Egypt, we have some fragmentary evidence of Esther. From Persia, we have some fragmentary evidence, some synagogues have some fragmentary evidence. And we have the book of Esther after the destruction of the temple and after the diaspora of the Jews. We have a lot of examples of the scroll of Esther being written and the Feast of Purim being celebrated, but we don't have them in the New Testament, and we don't have them in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Why is that? Anyone? Yes, Margaret. It's not the same. Feast of Booths, that's a good question. So there are three. Oh, okay. I got in my mind, I got to go back to my training from 5-6 years ago. Anyway, so the three major holidays that are set aside by Moses are Sukkot, Passover, and what? No, that's Sukkot. Sukkot is the Feast of Booths. Passover is the Passover, and Pentecost. Thank you, Feast of Weeks, which is a certain amount of time after Passover. So those three were instituted by Moses, and we see all three of those mentioned in the New Testament. Passover is mentioned a couple of times. We have Jesus and the disciples going and celebrating the Feast of Booths, and we have, very famously, the Pentecost. But the majority of the New Testament, and most of what we have about Jewish life and Jewish people in the New Testament, is based in Palestine. It's based in Judea. It's based in and around city of Jerusalem. The people have come home. They are back in their city. Purim, that was more a festival for the people who weren't there. Purim was the festival for the people who were still scattered, as a reminder that although they were still scattered, although they were still far away, they still had protection. They still overcame these obstacles. They still overcame the people who came against them. I was looking at it like this. Passover is very much a temple-centric. It's very much a promised land-centric idea. Passover, when it's instituted, the Jewish people are in captivity. They are enslaved in Egypt. That festival is telling them that their captivity is over and they are going home. Purim's not that. Purim is not them remembering the time that they are going home from captivity. Purim is a time that they remember when they are in captivity. That they remember that they are still away from their homeland. They're still away from their home. So Passover is more active, if you think about it. Purim is more, I'd say Passover is about them going home. Purim is about them staying where they are. Does that make sense? Am I completely off base with this? Yes. Mm-hmm. 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 That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
It's also problematic for Jewish religious leaders to know what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? In Jesus' day and that,
Yep.
time period as we were decades around
Mm-hmm.
that time period,
Mm-hmm.
because you still have this problem that the word for God does not appear in this book.
Mm-hmm.
And this 2-day holiday is not celebrating anything religious.
Mm-hmm.
It's celebrating, as she said, getting revenge on someone. So it's problematic if you're trying to figure out what to do with the Jewish religion.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point, though, maybe it becomes a thing again once those same Jews are then dispersed again instead of unity.
Mm-hmm.
Then now they're back scattered. They're not in the house. They're in small.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Jewish.
Yeah. All right. I've got a little bit of time left. Yeah. So I'm going to finish out the chapter. Verse 29. Then Queen Esther, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew gave full written authority, confirming this second letter about Purim. Letters were sent to all the Jews, to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, in words of peace and truth, that these days of Purim should be observed at their appointed seasons, as Mordecai the Jew and Queen Esther obligated them, and as they had obligated themselves and their offspring with regard to their fasts and lamenting. The command of Esther confirmed these practices of Purim, and it was recorded in writing. Sadly, we don't have that. Man, I wish we did. There's a lot of these phrases that we have scattered throughout. Letters being written and sent out to the 127 provinces. Commands being written out to the 127 provinces, laws being written down, the practices of Purim recorded in writing. You'd think of 127 copies, we'd find at least one of them. But, it's one of those things that's sadly lost to the ages. But we have here an official royal pronouncement that this is to be a celebration for the people throughout the lands, scattered throughout the provinces of Persia. All the Jewish people are obligated to celebrate this. With this chapter, the narrative thrust of the Book of Esther is pretty much completed. Next week, we'll get into the last chapter, chapter 10. Like I was saying earlier, chapters are more arbitrary than actual narratively useful sometimes. But next week, we'll go over the last little bit of the chapter and then kind of summarize what we've learned over the past couple of weeks. But there is one thing that Esther in this definitely shows us. It's the same thought that Mordecai had earlier. This idea of place, the sense of purpose, the sense of what Esther was doing here. The Feast of Purim and the reading of the Book of Esther yearly is always reminding the Jewish people wherever they are. It's always reminding us whenever we read it of this sense of place, this sense of purpose, and the sense of protection. Esther chapter 4, verse 13. Verse 13. Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, "Do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For he keeps silent at this time. Relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to this kingdom for such a time as this?" We've seen in the book of Esther, we've seen people scheming, plotting, planning, but we've seen ultimately the survival and thriving of these people, of the Jewish people, of the people who kept faith, who had this sense of faith, sense of promise, sense of belonging. Even when they were scattered among the Persian Empire, there's still this sense of belonging where they are. Who knows if we are not put in this place for such a time as this? If you take nothing else out of that, I want you to take two things. One is that Esther is one of the best written books that we have, and the other is this verse. All right. Hope to see you all next week. And yeah, thank you for coming.
Was together in spirit, in faith and unity, where the bonds of peace, of acceptance and love are the fruit of His presence here among us. So with one voice we'll sing to the Lord, and with one voice we'll lift out His word till the whole earth sees the Redeemer has come, for He dwells in the presence of His people. Oh, how good it is on this journey we share to rejoice with the happy and weep with those who mourn, for the weak find strength, the afflicted find grace when we offer the blessing of belonging. So with one voice we'll sing to the Lord, and with one voice we'll lift out His word till the whole earth sees the Redeemer has come, for He dwells in the presence of His people. Oh, how good it is to embrace His command, to prefer one another, forgive as He forgives. When we live as one, we all share in the love of the Son with the Father and the Spirit. So with one voice we'll sing to the Lord, and with one voice we'll lift out His word till the whole earth sees the Redeemer has come, for He dwells in the presence of His people.